we're talking about principles of growth and development. So before we begin that, we need to define what is growth and what is development. What's the difference? Growth refers to physical changes. It's an increase in size. And our bodies increase in size because our cells multiply as well as they enlarge. This continues throughout our life. You wouldn't think so, but even as an adult, you notice old people have longer noses, bigger ears, and that's because their cells continue to increase. Cells also die off in the process as well. But it happens most rapidly through infancy and into adolescence. Even into old age, our body continues to change its shape. Now, growth is different from development. Development refers to an increase in complexity. It's a change from something simple to more complex. This refers to knowledge and behavior and skills that are learned and refined. The sequence is basically the same for most people and for children, but the rate can vary from child to child. The physiological maturity of children, their neurological, their muscular, and their skeletal systems determines when they are capable of learning. Development continues, and it's affected by environment. Culture affects development. Family values affect development. And all of these things influence what a child is likely to learn. Now, after you talk about growth and development, we refer to developmental milestones. These are major markers of accomplishment, as referred to as milestones. These milestones are useful in tracking the emergence of motor skills, social and emotional cognitive type skills, language skills, any kind of skill that the child builds. Milestones refers to a typical range. They represent behaviors that are typical within a range of behavior for what we call typically developing children. And these are arrived at by thousands of observations of observing children different ages and the things that they can do. And then looking at, this is the typical range, this is where most of the children fall. So when you see developmental charts that might say a child should walk at 12 months, that doesn't mean on their first birthday they're going to take the first step. It just means that this is a range that it could happen within. And that's what we call typical, regularly developing. Children outside of that are called atypical, and so they just don't fit into that particular model. So after we talk about growth, development, milestones, we talk about sequence of development. And this is composed of predictable steps along a developmental pathway common among a majority of children. This process is called continuity. And the critical consideration is placed on the order in which the child develops, not so much the time frame that a child develops. So for example, a child usually rolls over before they sit, and they usually sit before they stand. It's unusual for a child to not follow that pattern. And so the development of a child is more frequently measured in a sequence of what a child can do as opposed to a time frame. Developmental progress is rarely smooth. A child may stammer when they're learning to speak. A child may go through something we call food jags, where they only eat, macaroni and cheese and Cheerios, and they won't eat anything else, and then all of a sudden they try new food. Don't worry if your child only eats macaroni and cheese and Cheerios. They're not going to go to their wedding feast and eat macaroni and Cheerios. Children will eventually try new things. So, like I said, development is rarely smooth and even and progressive like a textbook. Things happen. So a child may, like I said, may stammer, they may get on a food jag, and occasionally a child will regress. For example, if a child was potty trained and something happened, they might have regressed and they just want to wear diapers. Now, you don't want them to wear diapers, but they want to wear diapers, so they're going to soil themselves and wet themselves, and they regress. That doesn't mean that they're always going to be like that. That just happens. So after that, we talk about age levels and expectations, or what we call norms, short for normals. Hundreds of observations, like I said, are conducted, and this is where they find the range of ages that are appropriate to a particular milestone behavior. Once again, it's about sequence over developmental age. Developmental age does have something to do with it. It does come into play, but the sequence of behavior is more important than the development or age. After that, we need to talk about brain growth and development. So this is the foundation for all aspects of child development, and it begins with the fetus. And the fetal brain growth is rapid, and it, of course, is influenced by the mother. The kind of environment that the mother provides for the child affects the brain development of the fetus that she's carrying. So obviously, if a mother is more nurturing to her body, she's more nurturing to the fetus. And if there's substance abuse, cigarette smoking affects the development of the brain. Drinking, alcohol, obviously drugs and things like that will affect the development of the child. Proper nutrition, and then as well as getting proper prenatal care and prenatal checkups and that sort of thing affects the development of the fetus. So the brain increases in size and complexity, and it has neural connections and that are formed within the brain. The neural connections as a child grows are ways that a child can bring in new learning that can connect to old learning. And when the connections can be made, those connections stick. And if there's new learning that happens and it doesn't have anything to connect to that it's similar to, then they have to make new formations and new connections in the brain, and that takes longer. So as a child is young, they're taking in lots of things and forming all kinds of new connections, and as they get older, they're connecting them to previous memories, experiences that they've had. Our brains take care of things that we don't use. They go through a process called pruning, just like you would prune a tree, cut off the branches that are dead that you no longer use. Our brain does that naturally. It cuts off things that maybe we've learned, but then we don't use. Algebra, for example. How many of you took algebra in high school and don't remember it? It's because we don't use it. Your brain prunes it away. Doesn't mean that you're not smart, doesn't mean that you can't learn it again. It just means that we haven't used it. That old expression, use it or lose it, that's exactly what happens to your brain. You don't use it, you lose it. After that, we need to talk about temperament. Temperament is partly genetic, component of our individual personality. It describes emotional responses in terms of intensity, disposition, mood, focus, and flexibility. It accounts for an activity level of alertness, irritability, soothability, restlessness, and these qualities usually lead us to call a child an easy child or a difficult child. So we've all heard people talk about, well, that child that baby was so easy and that baby was so difficult. A difficult child being one who cries a lot or is irritated easily or doesn't sleep well, and an easy baby is one who just seems to sleep well, eat well, be happy. Gender roles plays a significant part in our development, and these are determined by society. There is some evidence that gender roles are connected to genetics. Boys tend to be more aggressive than girls, and I would say that probably has to do with testosterone. But in general, our gender roles are determined by society, by the play opportunities that we offer children, by the playmates that we let children play with, by the adult roles that they see modeled, and slightly by genetics. And then we have ecological factors. Things that affect us from our environment, that affect development, are financial resources. They affect our food, our shelter. They affect the opportunities that we have. Our cultural practices affect development. Our general health and nutrition affect development. The educational level of a mother affects a child's development, and there's research out there that has a strong correlation between the educational level of a mother and how a child is advanced. They are as a good predictor of a child's school achievement. Child rearing practices are factors that affect development, and our family structure affects development. Children that are at risk are low weight, birth weight, and premature birth, typically associated with poor maternal health or inadequate prenatal care, substance abuse during pregnancy, poverty, maternal age outside of what's the norm, so a very young mother or a very old mother. Harsh punishment, such as repeated spanking, has also been shown to be related to lower IQ. Again, I want to talk about typical and atypical. Typical means within the norm. Atypical is the term that we use for a child that is outside of the norm. So when we talk about development, we talk about it in 6 domains. The first one is the physical domain, and the physical domain is the actual growth of a child. And then the motor domain, which is their fine motor skills and their gross motor skills. We talk about their perceptual domain, and the perceptual domain is how a child perceives things. Their cognitive domain, that's how they think. Speech and language obviously speaks for itself, and then their social-emotional domain. So the first one I want to talk about is their physical domain. Physical domain is governed by heredity and greatly influenced by environment. Physical growth and development is a highly individualized process. Changes in body shape and proportion and overall body size are part of physical development. And it's responsible for our muscle strength, our vision, our motor skills, our bladder and bowel control. So all of those things go into the physical domain, the physical development of a child. Next is the motor domain. The motor domain is activity, and it starts in infancy with reflexive responses. So a child might squint with light and have a sense of being dropped, so their arms kind of jump out. But as a child develops, it becomes more voluntary. Their gross motor skills are their large muscles. So those are the muscles in their legs and in your torso, and the big muscles in your arms that are connected with running, jumping, skipping, walking, being able to roll over something, being able to lift something heavy. Those are gross motor skills. And then there's fine motor skills that are associated with hands and toes, primarily hands, but it's the pincer grasp and holding on to a writing utensil or an eating utensil. And these skills, what we know about development is that they develop from the torso out. So a baby's core body, like when they roll over and when they sit up, in their abdomen, are the muscles that are developed first, going on down to the finer motor skills, to their hands and their fingers and toes, and being able to balance and grip. Those are developed last. So their gross motor skills are developed prior to their fine motor skills. The next domain is the perceptual domain. And the perceptual domain, sometimes called self-help skills, is the increasing complex way a child uses information received through their senses, through their sight, through their touch, taste, smell, and hearing. And the perceptual development has different levels. So we call it the multisensory level, and it's the way that information is received. So a child might listen to music and they're taking in their music. Then we have the habituation ability to concentrate on a specific task, such as looking at a book. So we've gone from taking in something to be able to actually fix your eyes on something. And then we have the sensory integration, which is hearing something and reacting to it would be an example. So the first one is simple, just taking something in. The second one is a little bit more advanced, looking at something. And then last one is the ability to look at something or hear something and take it in and react to it, maybe smile because of it, or sing. That's perceptual. The next one is cognitive, and cognitive is the word that we use for thinking. And this domain addresses the expansion of a child's intellect or their mental abilities. It involves recognizing, processing, organizing information, and then using it appropriately. Some activities associated with the cognitive domain are recognizing, processing, interpreting, sorting, classifying, remembering. And in older children, a cognitive example might be evaluating an idea, making a judgment, solving a complex problem, understanding the rules and the concepts. anticipating and visualizing possibilities, or anticipating or visualizing consequences. The child that knows, if I do that, I'm going to be in trouble, or if I do that, that will make my mom happy. That's a cognitive realization from the cognitive domain for a child that's older. Cognitive and perceptual domains are very interrelated, and it's almost impossible to have development in one without the other. Then we talk about the language, speech and language domain. Language development. Language is defined as a system of symbols, both spoken, written, and gestures that enable us to communicate. So during the first year, we call that the pre-language or the pre-linguistic stage. And normal development is regular and depends on the initial learning opportunities. Initially, the child is totally dependent upon crying or laughing or body movement to convey its needs and its feelings. And during the second year, communication is mostly verbal. They still use crying and bodily gestures and things like that, but they're able to articulate with some words. And then over the next 3 to 4 years, the child learns to put words together to form simple sentences, going on to more complex sentences. Children take in their understanding and language, and this is called receptive language, what they receive. Children have a much larger receptive language vocabulary than they do the opposite, which is expressive, being able to say something. We've all had the experience of trying to learn a foreign language. You can understand and you remember more and can make more associations with things that you hear, but you might not be able to retrieve the word and express it. A child is no different. They understand when you tell them things, but they might not be able to say it back to you. Expressive language is what a child is able to express, what they're able to say. Language development is influenced by what a child hears at home and at school and in their community. And that's why it is important for you as a classroom teacher to speak correctly. If you use improper grammar or improper words, the child is going to model how that is spoken. And they're forming their what's called syntax, the way that they put together sentences, their grammar. So if they listen to improper grammar as they're growing up, when they go to school, they're going to use improper grammar, and they're going to have trouble with it. So it's important for you to model correct grammar. Next is the social-emotional development. This is a broad area, and it covers how children feel about themselves and feel about their relationship with others. And included in this development are areas of gender roles, temperament, independence, morals, trust, acceptance of rules, and social and cultural expectations. Children develop in their social and emotional development at different rates. And things that affect their social and emotional development are genetics and cultural differences. Health affects their social and emotional development. If a child doesn't feel well, then they're probably not going to be as social as a child who does feel well. Their living arrangements affect social and emotional development. Maybe they can't go out and meet friends. Maybe they have lots of friends. Maybe they live in a dangerous neighborhood, and so they have to be careful about who they speak to. And the opposite is true of a child who might live in a safe neighborhood. Maybe they are able to speak to anyone, so they become super friendly. Family interactions affect their social and emotional development. You can imagine having siblings. If any of you have had siblings growing up, that affects how you react to people. You learn to, if you had a tough sibling, then you learn how to defend yourself. If you had a nurturing sibling, then you might learn how to be a nurturing person as well. In your experiences, the child's experiences with the larger community also affect their social emotional development. Think about domains as being associated with every single experience that a child can have. The more experiences a child has, the more ability they have to develop. So take away the TV set and put the child in front of people. They react to expressions and the way that people react to them. Those are learning opportunities. Being at a family reunion, taking the child to Sunday school or church and interacting with people there, taking them to preschool, taking them to birthday parties. Those are all things that the child can learn how to develop their social skills and their emotional skills. within the context of a community.